Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Bilal Baloch, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Inquire AI, which is on a mission to make organizations' knowledge more efficient. Its technology empowers companies like Apple and Oracle through diverse knowledge and a range of perspectives, not only in person, but within virtual circles. Bilal joins me to discuss what the future of information consumption looks like and how technology can be used to find the accurate information. Bilal, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Jill, thank you for having me. Big fan.
What does the future of market transparency look like?
Yeah, look, that's a big question. I think fundamentally, when we're talking about the future of information, the future of market transparency, quite frankly, how we consume and think about information and data as a whole, I think we can't get away from what undergirds spaces such as the metaverse, such as blockchain, right? The blockchain doesn't just allow you to own digital goods in a virtual world. You won't just own the NFT in the real world, you can own it in a virtual world too. But going beyond just NFTs and commodities and trading on crypto, these currencies, cryptocurrencies, and the blockchain also enables users to have zero cost or near zero cost international transfers owing to its connection with rapid internet production and capacity. And because of these transactions on the blockchain being permanent, having unchangeable records, asset managers can utilize them in new and interesting ways. For example, not just securely, but also fluidly, sharing critical information such as asset history and relevant service providers and partners. So, I think the way in which we think about market transparency, we first have to think about how we're going to be recording and securely sharing information. And I think the way in which we're now seeing the blockchain really go beyond just crypto and entering the metaverse, our conversations around Web3 is going to be a key part of that.
How is the metaverse making way for more intimate conversations going beyond the standard Zoom call?
Yeah, it's interesting. Given our business, we think a lot about the future of work, right? We're thinking constantly, how are people collaborating? How can we get them to collaborate better in more intimate ways? Of course, COVID was a big disruption to all of us, personally, professionally, and we shifted, I would argue, somewhat seamlessly to the standard Zoom call, right? It's not as though video conferencing didn't exist before. Video conferencing was synonymous with a Skype call for many years, but that was a band-aid. Thinking about the future of work, that's far more of a structural change that we now have to make way for and adapt to. In the US today, Jill, 80% of businesses are either moving to or thinking about their remote work strategy, and a Zoom call simply won't cut it. 60% of remote workers in the US today, for example, talk about Zoom fatigue, especially women. How is this impacting societal aspects such as our relationships, our interaction, collaboration with colleagues? These are important questions that we have to ask. And so the metaverse and the conversation around the metaverse as it pertains to the future of work comes at an important time, right? I mean, look, let's think beyond just sort of gaming and brands and concerts happening in the metaverse. One of the most proximate ways in which I think we can leverage the metaverse, quite frankly, in the immediate term, is going beyond our interactions with a screen, this interview notwithstanding, and think about how we can make our interactions with colleagues, clients, in our case, experts and other information providers more immersive. And so the metaverse is a key place, is a key mechanism for us to be able to do that. Now, of course, technologies that will enable it, VR, AR technologies, internet speeds, being able to do so in a way that doesn't feel laborious or swings us back to the kind of fatigue we're now seeing with video conferencing, that's going to take time. But certainly getting to a place where we can be more interactive and have more immersive experiences that quite frankly come with their own social currency will be enabled by the metaverse.
And I'm glad you brought up the fact that it's going to take time because, Bilal, of course, we have to think about scalability and cost as well. And part of that also comes with information consumption, consumers of news, how we are acquiring our information. What does the future of information consumption look like? And what are some of the trends that you've observed?
Yeah, big question. Look, I think you've mentioned on your show before with various different guests, this exact topic, right? And I think for me, it fundamentally comes down to trust. We've gone historically from being able to gather information from one source, an individual, perhaps in a tightly knit network in your local area, in your locale, to fast forward several decades and centuries to the aggregation of information through various different fora, whether it's newspapers, news channels, think tanks, governments, so on and so forth. And our ability to consume and digest these vast mounds of data has gone hand in hand. But certainly, I think when we look around now, there is information overload. And with that information overload, there is a parallel trend that we've seen both in our political space, in our social spaces, around a trust deficit around politicians, institutions, businesses, so on and so forth. And so that's the big puzzle here, right? Is when we think about the future of information, how do we square this circle of there being a lot of data out there being a lot of information around markets, industries, consumers, products, alongside a fundamental trust deficit around where that information is coming from. So the advent of the metaverse, or let's talk more broadly than that, Web3, which really brings together several different components, but one which I think bears talking about here is the focus on communities, right? Concretized most clearly by the concept of the DAO, which I won't rehash for your viewers who have, I'm sure have heard a lot about it. But I think if we're talking about the future of information, people want to have a say and people want to be able to trust what they're coming across and trust its source and be able to verify that it certainly comes with a lineage, whether that's an intellectual lineage or whether that's a lineage of whether the facts that are being presented to them have been proven out. And technology such as the blockchain and how we think about recording information, recording the sources of information, I think that actually gets us back as close as possible to times in the past where we've had a greater trust in the information that we're receiving. So to put a fine point on it, I think the current trend of information coming from all different sources and places, facilitated by whether it's newsletters and Substack, whether it's YouTube, whether it's channels such as your own, that provides us an opportunity for individuals to have a say. But the next frontier really has to be about building trust in those sources. And I think the blockchain can facilitate that, given the implicit nature of the technology and how we can verify, record, trace the lineage of where facts and information and licenses come from. And what will be most interesting to watch is that the role that governments can play here.
Right, and Bilal, let me just cut you off for a moment here. In the interest of time, I want to go back to the trust conversation first. This is the thing that keeps me up as night, not only as a reporter, a content creator, a member of the media within my grad work in comms and information services. This technology is great. And back to my point before about scalability accessibility, right? When we think about these technologies for purpose and social awareness, can we all have access to this? But the misinformation, the general distrust when it comes to the media and the government, these are the things that keep me up at night. Even if we look at older technologies like Photoshop as an example, how many times have we studied within our grad and doctorate work photos where something was taken out or re-edited or we used different types of filters just to get that perfect shot? What about authenticity and truth? Weren't platforms like social media designed to provide authenticity? So it sometimes can be a double-edged sword there when you think about VR and AR and Meta and Web3 and so forth. How do we police this, if you will, in a highly polarized society when these technologies are being designed for content creation for all? I think that's kind of the existential question that consumers of news and content creators and the technologists are grappling with.
Yeah, look, and you're right, it is existential, but I would argue, is it new? Probably not, right? I mean, you think about the advent of the printing press, we think about books as having this, being this pure space now compared to what we're faced with today. But for every book that's provided light and illuminated ideas and new facts and new theories, there's probably 10 others that advanced propaganda and misinformation, right? So I don't think the problem is new. The scale at which it's happening now, you're absolutely right, is perhaps unprecedented. And so I think when we talk about trusting information, we have to first and foremost, I think, bifurcate the content of that information when it pertains to, do I agree with this or not? Does this align with my ideological beliefs or not? And whether it's verifiable. And I think that's the first place that we need to start. Right now, Jill, we're in a situation where even verifying whether something is accurate is tough, like you mentioned there about, documents being forged, information being false, images being doctored. I think the first port of call is, how can we get to a place where we can verify and authenticate records? And then I think we can get into a space that we're all familiar with, which is debating the merits of that information and whether it jives with the kind of society we want to build and live in. But right now, I think we've often conflated verifying where information is coming from is a trusted source versus whether I agree with it or not. And that's the kind of polarity that we need to get away from.
All right, Bilal, I could keep you all day on this, but we have to cut it from here. Thank you so much for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you for having me, Jill.